Welcome to the Optimal Leader Project podcast, where we bring you the best examples of leadership success to share their secrets about what it takes to break through mediocrity and achieve success for themselves, their organizations, and the people they serve. Grab some paper because we'll share valuable takeaways that will surely be worth the investment of time. Let's get started and help you to achieve your best as you become the optimal leader that you are meant to be. With us today, we have Pat Atwal. So, Pat, welcome to the podcast. And so, I'm going to do this because I'm going to do just an understated way to introduce you and tell everybody about you. So, why don't you just give us a few minutes about your claim to fame? Because as we've met over the last few months, you've just done nothing but impress me about what you've done. So, I think it's a shorter list of what you haven't done. So, give us a little bit of background about what you've done, what brought you here on your leadership journey, and how you inspire others.
Thank you, Wade. It's great to be part of this. I'm an attorney by training. My background's in litigation, and I just love being able to pull things together and help solve those problems and work with interesting people. And litigation always allowed me to work with a broad kind of background there. And I got into technology. I started working as a corporate lawyer in that area and realized the business side of things were where things were really happening. And I moved over to strategic alliances and working with sales, and eventually I ended up working with a cybersecurity company locally as their chief operating officer. And that was a great journey just to learn about cybersecurity. It really helped me further test my skills in leading such a complicated team in a very, very complicated industry. And as I developed those skills, I realized I wanted to try to use them in other areas. And most recently, I've branched out on my own with Brightway Consulting. I'm part of the Spokane Angel Alliance, and I'm very fortunate to be working with some of the great startups in town and helping them jumpstart their business models and get things going.
Now, part of your bio that I read is called, you call yourself a fractional COO. What is a fractional COO?
That's a great question. Fractional COO means that I divide my time between different companies and working with them to solve those operational and how to take their strategy and turn it into operational steps to succeed on their goals. And it allows me to work with a portfolio of companies, and it allows me to work with some very interesting people who have interesting problems to solve.
Now that sounds it actually sounds kind of fun, because so one of the things that I've loved to do over the past 30 years is I'll go to work for I'll go do a real job, and then I'll go consult and get to go work for a bunch of different companies, and then I'll go get a real job, and then go back and forth like that. But I've always had a client on the side and or more, and I've just enjoyed being able to be out there with more opportunity to go learn from different places. But it's been so much fun. So what's been your experience with working with so many different companies and different leaders out there?
It's been a great experience. I find it very, very invigorating. You are listening to people who are in different places in their life, have such different backgrounds and different goals, and they're all visionaries. They have these incredible things they want to accomplish, teams that they put together that they value highly, and then just need to be able to work with someone who can help with those next steps. So they really focus on how to utilize the resources they have and know where they need to, what is the detailed part of this. For visionaries, often the details are not the biggest and most important thing, and that's where I can really help them and say, hey, I know where we want to get to, so let's focus on what we need to do to get there, and these are the things. But then I can also work with their teams to ensure that that is executed. So if you need to put together a sales team, if you need sales operations established, if it's how are we managing our scorecard, those are the things that I can help them with. And they're all trying to impact their own part of the world in a very positive way and create a great livelihood for the people that work with them. So it's fun to be part of that.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, you mentioned that they're all trying to impact their own part of the world, and one thing's pretty clear. Being when you say, all right, so what are you a doctor of? And it's like the doctor of leadership, and their first response is, yeah, right. It's like, no, really, I'm doctor of leadership, and they're like, so what do you study? I'm like, study leadership. Well, I mean that's pretty simple. It's just leadership. No, it's not just leadership, right? There's so many different ways and different approaches out there. And what have you found to be your greatest lessons in leadership as you've worked, yourself and with other people?
That's a great question because, as you know, leadership. There are so many different styles, and then sometimes people take it for granted that, oh, you're just telling people what to do. And leadership is about motivation. It's about trust in your team and being able to let go of things. That idea that you can give it to someone else and trust them to work on it is an important component of leadership that I think, especially for smaller companies, the visionary can lose sight of that, and they get mired in the day-to-day and they cannot be the visionary, and they're actually doing themselves a disservice. So I think being able to motivate and letting go and trusting others is a really important part of leadership.
Well, I think you crossed over into my next question, but I mean that whole concept of working on the business versus working in the business. I mean, it's so easy to step into that, and maybe you already answered this next question, but it's that question of what do you see as the biggest struggle for most leaders that you've worked with?
I think it's twofold. It is working in the day-to-day rather than working on the future and staying out of it and trusting people. But then the other part of it is there can be almost too many ideas sometimes. When you're a visionary, you get a lot of ideas. That is what your superpower is. And the ability to be able to be disciplined enough that I am going to pull my team together, set annual strategic goals, break those down into quarterly strategic goals, and then try to resist putting new things on the team just because new ideas keep coming out. Now, you do have to make room for being able to pivot and respond when things aren't going the way they are, but it's the idea of being able to sometimes, for visionaries, to rein in some of that energy and those great ideas.
Yeah, no, I see that a lot. I mean, they want to solve all the problems of the world, right? And let's bring world peace and solve hunger and everything else all at the same time. It's
Yep. Yeah.
it's great ideas, great intentions. So I mean, looking at so many different companies that are out there, what and again, some of these questions overlap, but what do you find to be some of the habits of let's say the successful companies versus the unsuccessful companies, or maybe the successful leaders versus the unsuccessful leaders? Do you see a trend? Do you see some habits, some patterns that exist? Maybe compare and contrast between the two.
Yeah, that's it. I do, and often the great habit reverses the part that's not helping you. And to great leadership has a team around them that they trust. They have put together that team, and great leadership also means communication. That ability to communicate what the vision is, communicate not just to the executive, but ensuring that that communication is across the company. And that creates a great culture because everyone knows what they're doing and why, and they're motivated. It also creates employee certainty and safety because if they know what their visionary and the executive team is talking about and they're hearing it as we go along, then they know why they are doing what they are doing, and there will not be surprises. Surprises create uncertainty, and that creates fear, and honestly, that's how you undermine the success of a team because then they're sitting around talking about that and they're second guessing themselves. So I think that type of communication on a consistent basis, not just quarterly. If you're pulling your executive team together once a week, there should be cascading messages that come out of that they take back to their directors, who take it to their managers, who take it to their team, and then you make sure you have those company-wide meetings where they get to see the executive team, ask their visionary questions, and just kind of have it open at that point. But that level of transparency is an important part of great leadership.
Boy, we've seen that a lot, especially during this pandemic. I mean, the make or break. We talk about what's caused this. For example, I mean now that we're during this last half, this great resignation, right? We love to brand everything. Like hey, we have a new crisis,
Yeah.
let's come up with a new brand. As we
Mm-hmm.
dig deeper into the cause of it, I'm talking to people who are in the upper part of the C suites, and they're like, we don't get it. They're on the outside saying, like, we're paying more, we have better benefits, job security's there because we need our employees. All the terms and conditions are better than they were ever
Yeah.
before 2 years ago. I don't see what
Yeah.
the big deal is. Well, if you dig a little deeper and you say, well, hey, employees, what's going on? Well, they stopped talking to us 2 years ago. Why? Because, well, no news is just fine news because we don't know what's going on, but we don't want to tell them we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So they've created all these new senses of reality for themselves, and so that's created, to your point, uncertainty. Well, the company, we don't know where the company is going. We don't know if we have a future. We don't know if our jobs are secure. You know what? Oh my goodness, do I have a job? Are we secure? I'm going to go somewhere else. And it's not so much that they're concerned about any facts. They've created that sense of reality. So, yeah, we've seen it on the employee side for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a vacuum, and people fill it with their own fears. Then.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So along this journey of yours, of leadership, being a woman in leadership, is that different? Have you noticed any differences there, or have you observed any differences being a woman in leadership versus maybe what you've observed men having to go through with the leadership journey?
I think there are most definitely differences as a woman in leadership, and it's one of those things where it can be easy to gloss over and say we've created equity here and equality, and you are a highly educated, skilled woman, and everything is all even across peers. But I think the pandemic really brought it to a forefront where women were juggling perhaps more things than they had in the past because being at home, there's a different role. I approach my day to day, my weekly, the roles I have. And when you're in the house, you do have a different role. And I think it was very difficult for certain managers and people in those types of levels at their careers where they're not quite at the executive yet, they're at the manager, and they're having to juggle dealing with a team who has fear anxiety at home and then also dealing with their own household and kids that they're trying to help educate. But as a woman, just in the normal day to day, there are ways that we communicate and that come intuitively to us that our male colleagues may not have. And we have to be mindful of that to make sure that, maybe this level of communication is not comfortable for them, and to help bring them along and be patient, but also as women being very confident that what we have to offer is the value of what we bring here, and we shouldn't be hesitant about that. I think some women can think that they have to fit the mold of what the executive looked like in many decades past in a workforce that was based upon men coming back from the war and structured around them to what we have now. So it's the idea of working within the system we have to keep moving it forward and setting those trails for those who come after us, and leaning on our colleagues for that support, not just female colleagues, but male colleagues as well. Male colleagues have an important part to play in this, in how they support and sponsor female leadership in their organizations.
That's a great point. Now, I mean, from my end, I mean, like I said, almost 30 years, and especially on the HR side, and being a guy in HR, right, there's we have some different perspectives. But to be honest, I got to tell you, my most successful teams are the ones where they're all women, and to be honest, I try not to disrupt that secret sauce. I'm convinced they have superpowers. What do you think? What do you think are the superpowers that women bring to the workplace? Because I mean, I've got my list, but what are some of your thoughts on the superpowers that women bring to the workplace?
I think what is so popular now, talking about developing executives and leaders for their emotional skill set, and women have always been intuitive about that. That is the way that many of us lead. Now, it's not across the board. Women are not exactly all the same, but that type of leadership and the ability to listen intensely, not just to the words, but the person as well. You know, how are they? What is their body language? How are they nodding, or are they drifting away? Those kinds of things, I think. And then the idea to be able to lead by motivating. I think that is something that women intuitively have, and but being comfortable with owning the detail and the execution, getting it down to that, because we have the ability to listen closely, intently, and that's where the detail comes through that you need to be mindful of as you're leading. And bringing a different perspective, whether it's to the boardroom, to the executive suite, that different perspective offers the ability to solve problems in a unique way that may not have been presented without women in the boardroom or in those situations. And we need to be mindful of that's what you want. Just as we talk about, inclusivity, that's a big part of what you get when you have inclusivity, that you have different perspectives and you are actually stronger as a company by having those perspectives in the room and nurturing those. And I also think that with women, we're creating the next generation. There's so much now that we're talking about the workforce. Like, what is the workforce of the future? What will that look like? I think more women in those leadership roles is going to encourage that next generation of women to want to step into those and see, not that this is a step or a stretch for me. No, this is the normal path of my career. This is the normal progression. And those are the things that we bring to play as executive leaders.
Boy, I think you hit it. I mean, you hit it. And that insight that you're talking about, that insight that women bring, is incredible. I find that we as men, we want to get to agreement, and whoever has the loudest voice or who we think is the biggest, has the biggest, biggest influence, or we want to make them happy. Let's get on board because that sounds great. It's a great idea. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now at the same time, what I also find is that, and again, this is general, not specific, but I also find that at times I see women sometimes turning their strength into kryptonite when they don't feel comfortable using their superpowers, and they're not free to feel like they can step into it and lean into it, as Sheryl Sandberg would say, right? When they don't lean in and push that forward. And offer that strength, and there's so much feedback and so much development left on the table because they're not offering that. But I find that once I give my full permission and let them know, no, really, it's okay. You have to tell me, your boss. You got to give me the feedback. You have full permission to do so. Once they're comfortable doing that, wow, then everything, then the progress begins. But without them knowing to say, look, it's okay, just like at home, to say, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure that's a good idea?
I agree with that. I think it's to give ourselves permission and to silence that voice of, whether or not I need to know 120% of this job, not just 75 or 80% to be able to say I can do it, or I need to have that super skill set to take on that stretch project. We don't need it. But I do think it's important to also understand that just because we talk about women being able to have these powers that they can rely upon, it doesn't mean that they should always be tapped for those things. I think sometimes women can be told, oh, you're great. You did a great job. We're going to promote you to manager. And you have great people skills. You do this. If you are uncomfortable with that, then it is also important to say so. Not everyone is cut out to be a manager. And just because you're a woman, it doesn't mean you have to be the one pushed to lead the team as well. Maybe you are the one that's not comfortable doing that, and it is okay to present that as well. We want to elevate and support, but we don't want to create an obligation that every woman needs to fit into that.
Amen. Know your strengths, right? If you're a contributor, be the best contributor possible.
Yep.
If you're meant for leadership, let's develop you into that leader. Be the best leader possible. But to your point, let's not push you to that point of failure, because that does nobody any good. So that was a great point. Great point.
Yeah.
So, back to that concept of, general leadership growth and development. I mean, what are two or three things maybe that anyone working right now to improve their leadership abilities? I mean, what are two or three things that you would recommend that they do if they're working on developing their leadership?
I think a really great place to start is to ask the people that you work with, whether it's your manager or the executives or it's your HR director or head, and say, I am very interested in moving my career forward. What are the skill sets you see in me that I can continue to further develop, and where are the areas where I can learn more? Once you become candid about that in your workplace environment, then those that are making decisions about who can be involved in leadership programs, who can we tap for more involvement at certain levels, they will become aware of your desire to do that. So I think that is a great place to start, and they will find that doors may start to open for them, opportunities. And once you do, and you're speaking to people at that level, they will all have advices like, hey, there's an executive coach we're going to hire for the company. We would love for you to consider being part of that. Or why don't you read this book? Or there's a conference coming up. We would like to send you on it. And those are things you can research on your own and say, hey, I understand there's this conference, and you're speaking to whoever your manager or director is and say, I would like to work on this over the next year. So can I go ahead and attend this? And that can be part of your development of your career. Maybe there's not room to move you to a team leader or manager, but there's room to allow you to start to participate in those programs. And then there are just some great books out there. I love, I can't remember the name of the author, The Coaching Habit. It really drives home how you listen and ask questions. And once you start doing those things, even in meetings that you are not in charge of, people will start to take notice that you have some abilities here to guide.
We don't have to wait for the title to step into those leadership habits, and you start to get noticed pretty fast.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you start to be that person is a good way to start.
That's fantastic. I think that's great. Start to act in the capacity that you want to get to, rather than waiting to be tapped. That's spot on. Any other words of advice? So for anyone looking to to step up their game, to advance their leadership capabilities, to step into the next role, any additional words of advice that you have that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Don't hesitate. If you see that something needs to be done and you are in a role or capacity, be comfortable calling out that this needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and having those conversations. Because often if you are the one presenting that and raising it, then the people that are listening to you are going to say, well, you understand this gap. Would you help us with this? You start to create those opportunities for yourself.
That falls right in line with our GSD model, right? Get stuff done. People are waiting for you to be the leader in the room. I mean, how often do we sit in that stuffy room and waiting for someone and just thinking, it'd be nice if someone would go open that window, and then finally somebody does, and they never asked for permission. They just stood up and did it. Why? Because they're going to be the leader in the room. And, that's all it takes, is for someone to stand up and be the one to take that first step. And that's all it takes.
Yeah,
difference between success and failure is just standing up and taking that first step. So I'm glad you made that point. Just go do it and get stuff done. So awesome. Well, Pat, it's been a pleasure. So how can they find out more information about you? How can they get in contact with you or learn more about Brightway Business Consulting? How they get in touch?
They can reach me through LinkedIn. That's always the easiest. It's I'm on there, and they can also email me, pat.atwal@brightwayconsulting.io, or they can go to my website at brightwayconsulting.io as well.
All right. Excellent. Well, it has been a pleasure. And again, as we seek new ways to optimize leadership, that's really the core of our project here, is to help people become their best. So it's been a pleasure, Pat, and we look forward to hearing more and to pursuing more. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
All right. Take care.